I'm Emma Roodhouse. I'm a curator at Colchester and Ipswich Museums and a researcher into Constable's early years here in Suffolk.
My name's John Day. I run the East Anglian Traditional Arts Centre, and I was asked along for a really pleasant day looking at Constable country.
Some people describe him as lazy.
Oh, who?
No, I think he was very industrious.
Yeah.
He was a great worker.
Yeah.
And when you consider the times with the heating and the lights, he must have been at the easel an awful long time.
Yeah.
When Dunthorne came along, he helped him by laying out the palette and things. That helped. But when you think of the number of major pictures he painted, he was industrious.
I meant in terms of painting style, was in terms of not including sort of things to make it more grand or...
Well, he wasn't courting a crowd or an audience to paint pictures that they wanted. I think it's fair to say at some early stage he decided he'd paint what he wanted to, and they would have to come to accept it. Now and again he bends and you can see a picture which is more commercial than others, but in the main he was painting for his own satisfaction and waiting for the world to catch up. I think it's fair to say in about 1820 was the watershed year. 21 was the exhibition with the Haywayne, and then the French interest, Arrowsmith.
Yeah.
He was trying to buy paintings from Constable and offered him a deal on the Haywayne, which didn't come off to start with, but then it was put with other pictures and there was a deal done, and then they got taken to Paris. So I think probably that was the start of his international recognition, and at one time there were more important paintings being sold in Paris than in London, so he was adopted in France and then became something of a seed for some later Impressionist artists.
So why did he struggle so much to be sort of mainstream in the UK at that time?
I think because his style and his freshness was not really acceptable, and we're still in Georgian times, and when you think it's a fairly austere brown time, then he was a revolutionary. He was bringing something from the end of the 20th century and plonking in 1820, and they weren't ready for it. He was accused of putting snow on his branches and things like that, which is when he put dew on the trees. But he really was a revolutionary from that point of view.
Yeah, I think the use of the kind of lighter colours and the thicker paint, certainly in later works, was quite groundbreaking in his approach to that scene of landscape, and it just wasn't. It was quite shocking for people. They couldn't really quite see it as yet, but he wasn't straight off the bat like into London. He was a little bit older than, say, people like Turner, in starting his art education as well. And although in 1802 he declares his manifesto, which is really to be a natural painter, it takes many years of kind of building that reputation up, and really knocking against some of the art establishment to get a academician status. All of those things come much later for Constable. And perhaps that's why, as well, after his death, it's not until the advent of the railways and then the introduction of this area as Constable country, people start coming here and viewing the landscape and understanding his art and where he came from.
Yes, there was a revival of interest in Constable in the 1920s, and in fact in Old English life as well. You get the Tudoresque replica buildings and things like that, but the travel had opened up tremendously with the use of private cars, and I think Dedham High Street in the 1920s would still be busy as it is in the 2020s.
So in terms of legacy, what did Constable, what was the biggest thing he left behind?
The painting of the Millstream, 1814, perhaps marked the beginning of Constable's obsession or ambition to record the Stour Valley, and that went on, and in a whole series of paintings up to 6 feet long he painted views on the river and the activities on the river, and I believe that he was wanting to leave that to posterity as a record of him as an artist, and consequently up until the late 1820s he was painting very, very consistently these large views, and I believe that's his heritage that he's left behind for us all.
I think he certainly influenced generations of artists and still continues to do that today. I think through his love of the landscape and the fact that he kind of broke away from traditional ways of painting our environment through, reflecting his love in that place. But also, I think for him as an artist, towards the end of his life, he wanted to leave as a legacy a kind of set of mezzotints, which are prints, which summarise a lot of his key artworks. So it's called English Landscape Scenery, and from the 1830s onwards, he worked with a printmaker, David Lucas, to devise this series of prints based on some of his earlier paintings, but also slightly later work, and to really sum up his approach to art. And there's one of the first images you come across is of East Bergholt House, and it's the frontispiece, and it has the house he was born on depicted, and there's some text underneath which talks about how that was the place that was the birthplace for his art, and it was the location that sort of brought joy and his kind of whole artistic creation.
I think it's true to say that Constable was one of the first pure landscape artists. In the 18th century there were artists who painted just landscapes, but the vast majority of the landscape content in a picture was to support a historic building or something of the nature of a central subject, and the landscape was incidental. And then Constable came along and actually wanted to promote landscape as its own subject, the art of nature. And that went on all his life, and he did meet a lot of resistance early on. Perhaps by the 1820s other artists were starting to come round to the idea, but he really was the first to do it in a serious fashion. And he met with resistance, and hence it took him many, many years to become a Royal Academician. There was a lot of old school resistance to his way of thinking, both in his style and his concept of making pure landscape a subject for paintings.
And I think that breakthrough into landscape as a pure subject was then what attracted a lot of other, artists who have subsequently come to the area. There are certainly Suffolk artists who, who were influenced, or at least pursuing the same sort of subjects. Thomas Churchyard of Woodbridge, to name one, but also, further on into the 20th century we get artist communities through Cedric Morris and Arthur Let Haynes in Dedham. A lot of artists were impacted by his legacy. Lovely place, dark.
Dogs?
Yeah.
Can't see any cattle hooves.
No.
Morning.